Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. And to everybody else, thank you so much for being here, for giving me your time. I hope that I will make it worth your while. Whilst I'm not necessarily going to speak a lot about meditation, I'm certainly going to be referencing some of the effects and experiences in meditation. Also going to be doing is using PowerPoint slides. So I hope everybody is okay with that. Yeah, thank you. I think it just makes it easier for everyone to follow. So I'm going to try and screen share right now. You know, when I try to answer this question, what makes my life meaningful? I realize that I have to come to the answer from two perspectives or two vantage points. The first of these vantage points is what I call the apparently separated self. And I think you might find the acronym perhaps quite suitable. This apparently separate self is, you know, the one that bears my name and that has all these different interests invested in a lot of different things, you know, and it's got all these needs and requirements. And it's a self that occupies me most of my open eye moments. For example, right now, that's the dominant self right now. And this self needs to be clothed and fed. It has to have coffee about 3 times a day. It journals and writes compulsively. It reads books like Harry Potter and Man's Search for Meaning. It mentors and teaches. It gets scared and jealous and insecure, and sometimes feels very fearful and alone to find significance. And, you know, oftentimes it cannot help but look in the mirror and almost always is disheartened by what it sees. So that is the ass Lucy, the apparently separated self. And that's one of the two vantage points that I need to be at when I try to answer this question of what makes my life meaningful. And the second vantage point is the vantage point of awareness. Now, this one is a little bit more difficult to describe because in actual fact, that awareness doesn't have a vantage point because it is not localized like the separated self or the apparently separated self. It's non-local. But it's all seeing and all knowing, and nothing happens outside of it. And all the modulations of the apparently separated self, Lucy, happens within this awareness, within this formless awareness. And all the other asses, the 8 billion asses, and all the plants and animals and rocks, and every form of life also happens within this boundless, seamless, endless awareness. Everything, in fact, we call life, I experience in this state of awareness, and it's most easily accessed when my eyes are closed. And if I were to step out of it and then try to describe it, these are some of the words that I would use to describe it. And so, you know, this formless, beginningless, endless, limitless, undeniable, powerful, irreducible, effortless self. And I use a mixture of adjectives and nouns when I try to describe it. And this awareness state of mind, this awareness self, is ever present. And yet it is, whilst I describe it with all these words, it itself is none of these. And while I use the name awareness, I often use it interchangeably with words like infinite intelligence or love or God. And it cannot be enhanced by anything that as Lucy does. Neither can it be damaged by anything that as Lucy does. nor anything that any of the 8 billion other asses in the world does. And that's one of the mysterious and amazing qualities of this awareness. And it's in this awareness that all my experiences, every thought that I have, every sensation, every emotion, every feeling, every image, every memory, every imagination, all my fears and anxieties, my neurosis, all of that are happening within this awareness, and yet it is untouched by any of it. It's totally self-contained and wanting nothing, needing nothing, needing no meaning either. It is the last post, so to speak. Nothing else lies beyond it. So when, as Lucy asks the question, what makes my, as Lucy's life, apparently separated self, Lucy's life, meaningful, I have to ask it in the context of awareness. Awareness which itself has no meaning and wants nothing. And yet it is everything. So the way when I do this ask this question, the answer that I arrive at is this: that what makes my life meaningful is the way I let those priceless qualities that I experience in awareness flow through into all my lived experiences as fully and freely as possible. And the more I allow it to flow through, the more I allow these qualities to flow through, the more my life feels richly meaningful. That's what I've arrived at. And so that's when I feel most deeply satisfied and fulfilled. And that's the foundation that I want to lay down to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. That I'm coming from this, some people will refer to it as this duality, when in fact it isn't, and that's why it's called the apparently separated self. But that's where I'm coming from, where I have to come at it from these two vantage points: the known, the as and the awareness, the known and the unknown, the finite and the infinite, the mundane and the mystical. And as I said, when I allow more and more of the qualities that I experience in awareness to flow through into all my lived experiences, that's when life is richly meaningful for me. But you know, saying that and then doing that are quite different things, aren't they? So it's easy to say all that, to know all that, but to put it into practice when, as we say, the rubber hits the road, you know, and that's when the friction happens, the resistance happens. And this resistance comes in all kinds of ways, you know. But I would say that the mother of all resistances, for me at least, is my ignorance of my awareness self, of my true nature. It is my forgetfulness of my awareness self, of my true nature. In all those moments when the rubber hits the road, I don't necessarily remember, I forget. And that, I suppose, is the great challenge for me in every moment of my life. And so how does this ignorance and this forgetfulness, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. show up, you know. Let me just get back there. Um, it, in my life, it shows up through my insecurities, my fears, my neediness, my doubts, my not enoughness, my despair, my loneliness, my attachments, my jealousy, my unforgiving, my need for significance, all my judgments, my ceaseless preoccupations with all of these, and the wonderful dramatic stories that they weave. And paradoxically, all these phases of resistance that show up in my life are not just demons that torment me, but mercifully, they also take me back to my awareness nature. You know, as they say, the obstacle is the way. The obstacle doesn't get in the way necessarily, but it is in the way. And it takes me to my awareness nature if I pay attention. And that's where my practice of meditation comes in. Knowing how to pay attention without any investment in the outcome. Now, to help me see through all these resistances so that I can move from a place of suffering and pain, insecurity and fear, etc., into the state of awareness, and to draw all those qualities, those priceless, luminous qualities. In order to do that, as I said, I need to pay attention. But the other thing that I also need to do, that I have found extremely useful, is to ask questions. And of course, the kinds of questions that I ask have to be very particular questions, because, you know, the ass Lucy is so masterful at deflection and at dodging and at avoiding, you know, almost as good as many of our politicians, I'd say. You know, so for me, it's learning how to ask what I call these bullshit blaster questions. Questions that just don't tolerate bullshit. You know, that will penetrate the veneer, no matter how thick, of the bullshit that usually props us up. And one of the best bullshit questions that I've come across was one that Viktor Frankl, as you will know, the survivor of the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust. He was also a physician and he was a psychiatrist. And he, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he said that he would ask his patients this question: why do you not commit suicide? It's not the most uplifting question, is it? It's not the kind of question you'd expect when you go to somebody where you're looking for some kind of solace, some kind of comfort, some kind of advice. But in fact, you know, it is the question that really strikes at the very heart of my reason for living. You know, what is my reason for waking up every morning, for choosing, whether consciously or unconsciously, to stick around? I mean, it's not like my life is so irresistible, is it? There's so many, countless opportunities for me to check out, but I don't. And, you know, for the best part of it, for most of the time, checking out isn't even an option that I consider, at least not seriously. It might come by fleetingly, but I don't ever take it very seriously. And it's good to ask why. And, you know, I have an answer to this. This is my answer, and it comes in two parts. The first of which I will just mention, and because I don't have time to go into it, And that is that the impulse of life, when it is left unchallenged, just carries me on its current. And so for most of us, we don't consciously challenge the impulse of life. And so it just carries us on in its current. The second part of the answer is what I've been talking about so far. It's finding meaning. And, whilst I don't necessarily ask myself this question, why do I not commit suicide? I do it indirectly. And one of the ways I tend to do it indirectly, which actually concretizes it for me, is by asking this question. What has meaning? What remains meaningful when my life gets difficult? When I feel alone, or sad, or defeated, or when I feel I've accomplished or I've not accomplished anything remarkable to show for all the time that I've spent on this earth. And I'd like to talk about this using 3 examples where people either found meaning or were hit with the meaninglessness of a lot of the stuff that they were carrying around. And so the first example is about my nephew, one of my nephews, I should say, who I'm very, very, very close with. And just recently in a conversation, without any solicitation from my part, he disclosed that the reason why he hadn't committed suicide was because of Catholic guilt. Now, it shocked me. It shocked me not so much because he had admitted to thinking of contemplating committing suicide. As I said, we were very close. I've journeyed with him through very dark passages in his life. And I, of course, intuited, although he never told me overtly, that he had contemplated suicide, and more than once. But I'd intuited that surely it would have occurred to him. What shocked me was this attributing his, not following through to Catholic guilt. And I'll tell you why. Because his father, who is my brother, and all my other siblings are what you would call, in the old-fashioned way, very devout Catholics. And my nephew, on the other hand, is a self-declared agnostic, and to all intents and purposes, he actually lives it. So what had Catholic guilt got to do with this? Well, in moments like this, I know not to say anything. I know how to keep my mouth shut and just listen and wait. And sure enough, he continued. He said, I just couldn't bear the thought of Dad not being able to give me a Catholic burial. It would have been devastating for Dad. That was what his meaning was. That's how he found meaning. Now, the other example is with a client of mine. She had been, for the best part of 15 years, if not more, struggling with coming to terms with her separation. And she'd really felt that it was beyond her to handle. And for many years, she tried to manage it with drinking and binging. Now, on this occasion, when she came to me, she was really at her wits' end. She said, this thing has been troubling me for years, Lucy, 15 years and more, and I can't seem to shake it off. So, and I'll add a cautionary note here. The bullshit blaster questions must only ever be asked in a timely fashion. Timing is crucial. You don't just throw them out willy-nilly. Timing is absolutely crucial. And it so happened that I felt at that moment I was guided to ask a bullshit question. And the bullshit blaster that I asked her was this. I said, look, here's what's going to happen. At 5 o'clock this afternoon, it's game over. You're going to be dead. Everybody else is going to be here. You're going to be gone. It's now just coming up to noon. What are you going to do between now and 5 o'clock? There was a long silence. And when finally she spoke, she said, oh my God, I'd been struggling for years. And it just shows how crazy it is that I can keep thinking these meaningless thoughts again and again and again, and going through this horrible pain again and again and again. And now in just an instant, it seems to be gone. And so, and she told me, we continued our session, we talked about other things, but then we circled back to this, and again she said, oh my goodness, what a lot of time has gone. And I'm so glad that this has now happened. So the final example that I'd like to leave you with. So the final question's got to do with me personally, more directly, and that is a very recent experience that I had. It was at Christmas. And for the first time in many years, my kids volunteered. So I've got 2 grown-up kids, and they both volunteered to spend Christmas with me. I'm going to leave out a lot of contextual information simply because we neither need it nor have the time. So you've just got to take my word for it. But I was feeling, and I had felt over the years, very insecure in my relationship with my children, especially because I felt that their father had such an unfavorable influence on them, unfavorable to me, let me say, from the time I chose to leave him. These are all, by the way, stories that my Ask Lucy self comes up with, right? But nevertheless, they are lived experiences. I have felt the insecurity. I felt the displacement of loyalty of my children between myself and their father, and so on and so forth. So when they said that they were going to spend Christmas with me, I was absolutely thrilled because, naively I'd assumed, oh, wow, we could maybe have a Christmas like the ones we had when they were little. And, we'd have all the festivities, we'd enjoy all the different kinds of foods that our favorite foods, and drink and play games and exchange gifts. And the exchanging gifts was a big deal for me because I'd long expressed my disdain for these scheduled gift giving. And yet, because I knew my kids loved it, I thought, let's do it and I'm going to enjoy it. And sure enough, I did. So that's what I was, I decorated the house, got everything really spanking clean and everything else, and waited for them, and they arrived, and I assumed we were going to have the most gorgeous time. But when they got there, when they got to my house, there was only one gift that they brought, and that was for me. And so I realized that all the gift exchanging had been done, and had been done the previous day at their father's. And I know this might sound so petty, but my heart actually sank. It really did. But despite that, again, thanks to my meditation practice, knowing how to be able to stay present and so on, I was able to have a good time with them. We all had a good time. But unlike what I had assumed, that we were going to have this long set day, the whole day of being together, it didn't turn out that way, because after a few hours they left. And when they left, I felt crushed. I really did. And, you know, for at least a week thereafter, I was walking around with this sunken feeling in my solar plexus, you know, and my eyes were heavy, and the tears would sometimes run down, but then other times they would just stay there. And again, I say all this despite my years of meditation practice. And then again, I will say that because of my meditation practice, I was able to not just stay afloat, but to really recognize that there was more to life than just this experience that I was having at the time. And it was then that I had this breakthrough. You know, I would continue to function, meet my clients, do all of those things. Then afterwards, I would take time to sit in silence, in stillness, and meditate. And during one of those times, I realized how attached I was to my role as mother, how attached to my idea of what my role as mother was needed to be, and was and deserved to be. And what I also discovered, you know, was that I discovered humility and courage, because after Christmas Day, for a good 3 weeks, I did not hear anything at all from my daughter. I did hear something from my son, but not from my daughter. And so I knew that I felt this awkwardness and this sadness. And the humility and the courage was in texting her and letting her know that I was feeling sad and alone, and I wondered what was going on for her, and whether it might be a good idea for us to have a conversation, because I said, you know, I want to do and be better as a mother to you. It took a lot of humility on my part and a great deal of courage. And the amazing thing was that for the first time, my daughter sincerely apologized to me. Now, it's not like I needed the apology, not that I was expecting or even wanting it, but it reflected to me that she was in a moment of authenticity, of being able to free herself from whatever it was that had prevented her from expressing her true feelings till then. What also happened in that breakthrough was I realized that I'd been putting a large part of my life on hold because I was still expecting my children to be with me. I saw myself as the home that they would come back to time and time again. And now I was beginning to realize that that was no longer true. So I think in all these examples that I've just given, I hope I've shown that it's always about seeking meaning in life. Having meaning, losing it, seeking it, finding it again, finding new meaning. I'm coming to the end of what I have to say. Some of the things that I've come to also recognize is that curiosity and suffering make me ask questions. I prefer to do it out of sheer curiosity, but unfortunately, suffering is very much a part of life. And sometimes, if I'm not on my game, then suffering happens to put me back on it, and therefore to ask the questions that I need to ask. Questions are the basin in which lived experiences are rinsed by the luminous qualities of my awareness self. The lived experience of my ass, Lucy, my apparently separated self, are rinsed by the luminous qualities of my awareness self. So if I can just finish with this. So this is what I would like to finish with. Sometimes when I look at this thing that bears my name, I feel underwhelmed. I haven't accomplished anything of note. I'm not a shining light of presence that inspires greatness in others. And I cannot claim to know where I'm going exactly or why I matter at all. The only thing I can say on my behalf, and I question why I feel a need to say anything at all, is that I'm trying to live as honestly, or as some people might prefer to say, as authentically as I can. What does that mean? Well, that's an ongoing inquiry, and each day and each event and each experience provides me, if I pay attention, and I don't always, provides me with some clues or some pieces of this long and endless puzzle that I call my journey or my life. Every once in a while, I might be awake long enough to realize that I'm the one who's been dropping the breadcrumbs in the hope that they'll lead me home. But because I'm learning that I don't always remember the lessons, although I don't always remember the lessons, because I'm learning that the birds and other creatures tend to eat those breadcrumbs, I'm now using pebbles that I carefully etch with questions and occasionally useful answers to trace my way back home. So thank you, everybody, for so patiently hearing what I have to say. I thought that we might go into our breakout rooms now, but if you feel that we should have a question and answer session time, then I'm open to that as well. So I have two questions that I'd like you to consider. Please just pick one. The first one is, what has meaning when life gets difficult? When I feel alone or sad or defeated, or when I feel I've not accomplished anything remarkable to show for all the time I've spent. And the second question is, I'll just see if I can go back to this. Why do I choose to continue living?